Welcome back to Let's Just Do This. I'm your host, Todd Miller, along with my co-host, Margaret Wallis-Duffy.
How are you today?
Doing very well.
Good stuff. And it's going to be a great day in studio, as it always is when we sit down at this table to have some real soulful, life-changing discussions with our guests.
Genuine conversations about
You
life.
bet. You bet.
And our first guest is actually a previous guest. We'd had our guest, Casey Palmer, on one of our early podcasts that we did, and we were talking about it in studio 6-8 years ago. It was quite some time ago. So I want to read a little bit about Casey from Casey's bio. He's a 30-something, and we're not going to tell your age, Canadian dad from Toronto, looking to raise his multiracial family of 4 in an urban environment that never quits. And Toronto is certainly that. You write on parenting, racial identity, technology, which is getting crazy, and more. And you're out to prove that well-crafted words can really change the world. You were born and raised in Mississauga. You're now living in Toronto's East End after you got married. You create content that speaks to people's souls, and it's not just retelling events or words. And as a blogger, your style has caught the eye of brands like TELUS, Netflix, and Apple. And there's another one we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
For sure.
Welcome, Casey.
Thank you.
Well, and caught the attention of Let's Just Do This. So we are honored to have you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So where do we begin, Todd? I mean, one of the things first I want to say is that I just love to have a dad sitting across from us and being able to get real about what life is like. Before we even started rolling cameras, you and I had a very candid and brief discussion just about this crazy balancing act as an entrepreneur, as a parent, and really trying to figure it all out.
Oh, for sure.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story that comes from my love to create content in general. I've been writing online in some shape or form for about 16 years now. And I see in the progression from just trying to tell stories about life and figure things out to then being a man about town and talking about all these fun things going on in Toronto and experiencing that. And then I was actually ready to hang up my hat when we had our first son at the end of 2013, because I was just figured I'd be too busy to write or do anything. I was like, I have to take care of this. And a friend of mine actually told me that there really aren't too many dad voices out there talking about the fatherhood experience. Maybe you want to invest your time in that instead. And over the last 5 years, it's just blown up and transformed. And now it's something that my motivations have changed quite a bit. Instead of just want to do it for doing its sake, I do it to chronicle life as a father for my kids, so that later on they can look back and see why I made certain choices and decisions and the impact they had in my life at different stages and who they were and how they've grown. So trying to capture all that in one place.
You know, what I love, there's a lot I love about that, but one of the things that comes to mind immediately, and I hope you take this as an incredible compliment, often, and unfortunately at the stage I am in life, certainly older than you are and kids at a different stage, 22 and 16, I'm going to more funerals now than I've done in my lifetime, and it's part of life, and that's the time where we have those conversations and celebrate and reflect on someone's life and our lives together and the memories. Right. What really struck me about what you just explained, your motivation and chronicling this for your children, that set my heart on fire, because it really does actually speak to giving what a gift to your kids. What a learning experience, and being really quite vulnerable as a dad, I'm sure.
Indeed.
Especially in a public environment like social media. You are opening yourself up to people going, wow, what's he doing?
Yeah. So I had to say that, because it is like and this is what we want to talk about here on this show, is about living. Let's just do this. Let's live life to the fullest, and not in this, this fluffy way, but in a real, authentic way that life is precious, and leaning into that like you have. I just want to commend you for that. I think it's marvelous.
What I love about following you on Facebook every day are your 2 children, Isaiah and Xavier. Now, they are not only adorable, but they are
Sassy.
Okay.
They're so sassy.
We were having a conversation before we went on air about one of your children and you're saying, oh no, we have to shelter our child because he's getting all these bad influences. And then you said, no, it turned out he was maybe the ringleader, and I've been there as well.
He's come into his own as his own individual very quickly. You think it takes a long time until your kid develops a personality and their own interests and everything. It does not. He went into school and went from the first day being this very timid child, and he's still in his first year of school. He's gone from being super timid to just being the guy everyone looks to for direction and all that kind of stuff. And it can go really well sometimes and poorly at others, depending on what's going on.
Right. So a bit of a natural leader. Geez, I wonder where he gets that from. Yeah.
I try to, encourage and nurture his natural abilities and see where it goes. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
And so the kids are 4 and 2.
Yes.
And your beautiful wife, because of course I've also seen her on Facebook. What does she think of this dad's voice? And I do love that, because there are a lot, and don't get me wrong, having a mother's voice is so important.
Of course.
But I do love hearing a dad's perspective, and not just because as a woman I want to hear that, but even from the child's perspective. I think there's a lot of influence that mothers can have,
sure.
But the father's influence is equally as important, very different, but equally as important. How does she feel about all of this?
I feel like she got wrapped up in all of it unwillingly.
Yeah, that's an honest answer.
It's all very real. And she's, Sarah's been there from day one, where I was just kind of tinkering with things and trying to figure it all out, to now it's a very real and embedded part of our lives. So she accepts that I'm doing things in a way that are for the health of the family. I would never try to put something that will endanger or make us overly vulnerable, if you will.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with what's going on. And as the boys get older, I want to give them their own space to have their own voices. I can only tell their story for so long. As they become more coherent and can, really learn how to package their thoughts into ways that maybe other people want to hear their perspective on things, it will grow and evolve into its own organic beast as time goes on. So I think she's along for the ride. I don't know how long she thinks it's going to go. It has many years ahead of it. I will just see how it turns out.
Now.
But I do love the fact that you very candidly said your children will have their own voice. And I think in the world of social media and technology, and you write a lot about this, it's important, I think, for us to honor that in our children. And sometimes I think we forget that if we would go to post something. And I'm aware now with my own children, and I'm sure there have been times I've posted things. Well, I know there have been times. Yes, Carly, if you're watching. And you know what? And it's a lesson for me as well to honor at every stage and age people where they're at and what they feel comfortable with. So that's really quite interesting.
So you're a dad blogger. You're out there as championing the male viewpoint.
Yep.
Have you encountered any people that say, "Why are you doing this? Like, why do dads need to have a voice? Why is it important?"
Yeah. What happens with a lot of dads is that because we're taught to be these tough pillars of masculinity when it comes to fatherhood, you end up with these very private approaches to fatherhood, and people don't really have a clear definition of just what the modern dad looks like because of it. And so even in Toronto, which is a city of 2.8 million people, I'm one of only 2 or 3 dad bloggers who are there telling their story. There's not a lot of guys sharing that. And it does a disservice to the full spectrum and wealth of everything that a dad can offer to a family. And so part of it is trying to change the conversation, but I don't know if it's necessarily changing the conversation or really laying the foundation for just new ways of thinking about it altogether. Because it's so important to understand that, it's important for other dads to understand that, if they're messing up or they feel like they're not enough, they totally are. And just by being there and being present in your children's lives, that is enough to kind of take it wherever you want to go and build that relationship.
Men supporting men it's come a long way. It used to be just sort of, you wouldn't hug, and now we're having these deep conversations about really personal things. And then, like you're doing, you're publicizing them. You're throwing it out there for the world to say, I'm not perfect, I've made mistakes, I'm doing the best I can, but here are some cool things to try that's worked for us.
And you know what I love about hearing both of you talk like this is that certainly as a woman there are, and by nature we tend to share more and connect and have, whether you call it a community or a tribe. What I love about that is knowing that men too can have a place to connect and relate to their peers. And even if you're parenting very differently, still feeling like you've got somewhere where you can have that conversation. That's really kind of cool. So you're really pioneering and putting it out there, which I love. I really love that about this whole story.
I didn't necessarily mean to, but it somehow worked out that way. So.
Yeah.
So being authentic, how do you decide when something doesn't get shared with the world? Whether it's a situation at home or something you're just thinking about.
You kind of develop a sixth sense about it after a while. Now I just know that the way I look at it is that will my children be embarrassed by something I shared 10 years down the road? Will it have to be something where, things that go on the internet don't go away?
That's right.
Right? So you want to make sure that whatever you're putting out there, and I tell this to all parents, whether or not you're a blogger or just a parent sharing on Facebook or Instagram or whatnot, whatever you're sharing needs to have a lifelong permanence impact in your head. So if it's a story now that, my kids can look back at it and laugh 10 years later, amazing. But if they're going to be mortified and kids are going to be making fun of them in school, then it's something I need to be more wary of. And you can't predict everything, but you can at least try and have some best practices in your head of what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really good yardstick and place to start. And that's something that I think all of us need to think about. And these conversations as, you're parenting, as I do, teenagers and onward, that becomes technology has just become part of what we do, but that permanence, I don't think, certainly our youth don't realize the permanence of it, but even some adults aren't recognizing that this isn't going away, and we need to be proud of what we post and be okay with it long term.
100%.
Everything I did was on 8mm film, so it will never be seen.
In a basement somewhere, collecting dust. For sure.
What's your bigger mission? I mean, sharing family and dad information is great, but I'm sensing an even bigger why, a bigger purpose here.
Yeah, ultimately, I guess a lot of it comes from the fact that there is room for that authentic sharing of you can be involved in someone's life in a positive way and kind of be the eyes over their shoulder, seeing their good moments, bad moments, their successes, their failures, and it can all be okay. On social media, you see people post highlights too often and you never see the other side of things, and then that's where you get a lot of the issues with anxieties and mental illnesses and whatnot, because people feel like there's this invisible bar they're trying to hit at all times. And I'm like, life doesn't work that way. And what I'm trying to communicate to everyone is that you too can live your best life possible. You just have to accept both the good and the bad and be willing to have all that be part of your narrative. And I think as a dad, as a man, as someone who is a content creator, I want to show all sides of that at all times, so that, we try our best to make it all work. You will fail, you will flub, but as long as you can try and make each day your best, that's pretty much the best you can do.
So on that note, I hope that you'll stay with us. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to have more stories with Canadian dad blogger Casey Palmer. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Let's Just Do This. I'm Todd Miller, along with Margaret Wallis-Duffy and our fantastic Canadian dad blogger, Casey Palmer.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So, you've been really busy, but you've got more that's been added to your plate recently, and I want to talk about something that's near and dear to our heart. You're definitely a media veteran, but you've launched your own podcast, and it's called Chatting with Casey.
Indeed.
Do tell about us.
Yeah, I've been meaning to do a podcast for about 5 years now and never got around to it. I do it in part to honor a friend from Twitter who passed away from an illness back then, and she always said I had a voice that was meant for radio, so I've wanted to do it for a long time. Chatting with Casey, in its core, is meant to talk to people about their passions in places where they are the most passionate. So coffee shop owners at their coffee shop, or I have one friend who I'm going to go walk the grounds of Casa Loma with and things like that. And I want to make sure I get just the most authentic and best conversation out of my guests to share with everyone else. And I spice in little sound clips of me and the kids and other things like that to spice it up, but it's just me having fun with audio for the most part.
Sounds like glass. Well, I'm going to be bold and say I'd love to be on your podcast, and I'm sure, Todd, you would be too.
I'm sure we could find things to talk about.
Well, and we did an entire show with Jerry Visca, the Y guy.
Okay.
He is out, another dynamite male who's out to inspire. His mission. He was an award-winning architect, and because of a situation in his life, his daughter got cancer,
Oh, wow.
And it was a real wake-up call, and he had a successful career and then really realized the importance of life.
Okay.
And now he's out to inspire 1 million Ys globally.
Wow.
And so I've been part of the Y movement. I'm a Y tribe leader. I truly believe, attitudes are contagious as yours worth catching. I'm a connection ambassador, and we talk a lot on this show, which is why Todd just raised it, about, what's your why and what does that mean. So that podcast really resonates with me, and we could have a heck of a lot of fun. So just putting it out there.
No, I love it. Thank you.
So what are some of the topics that you're chatting with people on the podcast about?
Well, it's only 2 episodes in, so we still have a long way to go. But it could be anything from people. I've been so lucky to develop these relationships with friends and others in my life that they are willing to tell me about so many different kinds of stories, whether it's, they've found their way out of poverty, or they had to deal with illness in the family, or, people really want to share their stories about overcoming and dealing with things, but not everyone has a platform for it.
Yes.
So I'm really trying to give everyone the way, a means of telling the story the way they want to tell it.
Nice.
I find that oftentimes we feel like we're not listened to, or people do not understand what's going on in our world, and I really want to give everyone the opportunity to do so. So that's kind of the huge flag that I'm trying to wave with the podcast. Come, tell a story, share it.
Fantastic. So we'll have to check that podcast out. Now, another thing that you've got happening, which is a lot of fun, and all of our listeners and viewers will certainly recognize this place, Canada's Wonderland. Yes. Tell us about the yes.
Thank you.
Tell us about the gig that you've got going with Canada's Wonderland.
So Canada's Wonderland approached for me to be one of their Wonder bloggers for this year. So it's a new program they put together to give further exposure to everything going on in the park. My kids are a little young, 2 and 4, so I think there's, the northeast corner of the park we'll be hanging out in on a regular basis.
Hanna-Barbera, it used to be called, it's not anymore, I don't think, but
Kids Funland, I believe.
There we
now.
go. See, that's,
Charlie Brown.
that just shows you how old my kids are, yeah.
But no, they've been very gracious. They've given us access to the park, and they'll feed us and make sure that we're taken care of while we're there, and we'll have plenty of time to take plenty of photos and videos of the kids as they experience it for the first time. They've never been, so it'll be really nice for them this season to get used to it. But it's been one of the amazing things that have come from just being able to develop the brand as far as it's come over time.
Very neat.
Yeah, that's an incredible opportunity. I mean, they have I could not imagine having access to that park for a day and then blogging about it, because there's just so much cool memories to be made there, especially with your kids.
Yeah.
So what, Father's Day is coming up. I guess it's important to me. I mean, I love being with my children on Father's Day and still having my dad and in this world with us. What do you do for Father's Day? Anything special? What are your routines?
Over the last few years, it's been just kind of relaxing with the family, and I try not to be too much of a diva about it. I'm like, okay, I could keep breakfast simple, and maybe we'll go out for a meal somewhere and things like that. This year, I try to spend the actual month of Father's Day trying to do a lot of celebrating of dads and dad content. So I'm hoping to reach out to a lot of the dads I met at the Dad 2 conference back in New Orleans in February. So I met all these dad writers and creators across North America, and I'm trying to spend more time honoring them as well. But I think ultimately it comes back to my entire idea of intergenerational growth. So I look to my fatherhood journey. I look to what I now understand about my dad, because now that I have my own kids, I get so much more about my dad and with the choices and sacrifices he had to make. And I just try to celebrate a lot of the male figures in my life who have either impacted me or I'm impacted now and things like that. So it'll be a busy month. But the day itself will also be a really good cap to the weeks that come before it.
You're not writing on that day, are you? You're getting a day off? Maybe.
One of the busiest times.
We will see.
Yeah. How do you, just to that, and just very briefly, how do you, with 2 young children at 4 and 2, as a content creator? I mean, creativity often, can't be called on by demand. And so how do you fit that in between, a toddler and a preschool or a school boy who's a leader in his own right? How do you fit that in, and you have a beautiful wife.
Indeed.
So how do you fit that in to just get that creativity going?
Finding those gaps in the schedule wherever possible. I write everything by hand before I type it up and put it online. So I will be on the subway with a notepad going to work and coming home. I will go through the day, and I put family first all the time because, that's something that needs to last over decades. But after the kids have gone to bed and after Sarah and I have spent some time together and we do all the chores after she's gone to bed is usually when I'm up working on other things.
Do you know what I love about what you're sharing there? And it ties back into the why and our purpose. And you just said when you're on your way to work. So I can assume then that you're working, and on top of that, you're building this brand as Canadian. And you know what? I think that needs to be said, because online, you can look at people and think, oh, geez, how easy it is. And in fact, those filters aren't always very clear. And what I love, though, is that when you're finding your passion in pockets of your time, but this is critical. We can do things. We don't have to say, oh, I can't do that. I've got a full-time job, or I'm a mom, or I'm a dad, or whatever it may be. But it also needs to be said that it's hard work.
It is.
But it's so worth it. Yeah. And I think that's really cool, because I think that's very empowering. And here on Let's Just Do This, that's something we really like to talk about, is that, in little pockets of your time, you can fire up your soul.
Definitely.
By doing things that make you happy and perhaps give you some freedom down the road. It might not happen overnight. In fact, I know it won't. But that's important.
Yeah, people often forget that 5 minutes a day is 5 minutes more than what you would have done otherwise. So it doesn't have to be these long stretches of productivity. You can take every little bit and make it work.
I love that.
You have a beautiful multiracial family. Race is everyone's identity. How do you introduce that into the conversation? How do you speak to that in that public environment that you have so willingly stepped into?
Especially, I'm going to say it, in the world we're living in right now, which
indeed.
Saddens me to my core that we're in 2018 and that I'm even saying this. Yes. But the reality is there is definitely a different temperature and culture that's happening that I don't agree with. I'm going to boldly state that. Yeah. But how do you handle that with grace?
Well, part of it is me being willing to tackle the what goes on with what is race and the identity that comes with it with my readers, whether it's in content during the year for Black stories, whether it's little things that pop up during the year. And some of it is my kids and coming to me with their questions. My 2.5-year-old came up to me last night, actually. I haven't shared this yet because I haven't had time to. He came up to me last night and he just came and rubbed his hand across my arm. He's like, "Black guy, daddy, black guy." And I'm like, who taught you? I wasn't, you're not ready to deal with, racial talks with your children at a certain age. You just kind of leap into it at a certain time. And so now I am aware that I need to confront it and deal with, the entire idea of racial identity and what it means, because my kids are aware. They are aware it's a thing. Yeah. And they're aware that mommy and daddy look different and things like that. So I almost feel that I have this obligation to just deal with it as part of what I'm putting out there in my content and not hide away from it. For the first few years, I'd be like, well, sensitive topic, let's not deal with that right now. Now I've had enough time and experience with it that I'm like, we need to talk about this. This is the thing that needs to get out there.
Yeah. And you're not alone in this struggle. And therefore, we need leaders and voices like you, which is why we're thrilled to have you on Let's Just Do This, because those voices are important to carry those conversations and hopefully to ignite more conversations with others that are feeling that same feeling and maybe have a different view on it, but that can have their voice as well. Yeah. So I have to ask this question because we always like to sort of get to know people on a bit of a different level and have a little bit of fun on Let's Just Do This. So if $1 million was dropped at your doorstep, what would you do with it?
Well, one thing I've been very blessed with the brand and everything else in life, that I realized that money can only get you so much happiness. And I've actually, I don't buy as much as I used to anymore because I have so much stuff in my house I have to use now that I'm like, let's just, get through it. But I like to say that life is the sum of your experiences. So I would probably take some time to figure out, my family schedules, if I have to pay a few mortgage payments for a few people and things like that. Give everyone a month to go out and just go somewhere remote and spend time together as a family. My brothers, my parents, and everyone, just get out there and get some real quality time together, because there's so few opportunities to do that in the lives we have today that,
So true.
I just want to get out there somewhere remote, somewhere amazing food, amazing people, ocean view, and lots of things to do and explore. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. Well, Casey, I know that this is the second time we've had conversation, but I know there's so much more to talk about, and I really hope that you're going to continue to share with us and maybe come back and be on Let's Just Do This again.
I'd love to. Thank you.
And of course, if any of you would like to follow, because I'm sure you're going to want to after listening to this very soulful and genuine conversation with Casey Palmer, where can everybody find you?
CaseyPalmer.com is where my blog, Casey Palmer Canadian Dad, is hosted and has links to everything, the podcast, the YouTube videos, Facebook, all of it. But yeah, if you look up Casey Palmer Canadian Dad or go to CaseyPalmer.com online, it will link you to everything else very easily.
Absolutely. And of course, we will be posting through Let's Just Do This and Wow New Media. It is such an honor to be sitting across and actually meeting you. The last time I hadn't actually physically met you. And that's kind of the cool thing about this thing called the internet, is that we get to meet people virtually that we hadn't, but it's always better. I'm a connection ambassador. I love to be face to face.
Fair enough. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So I hope you've enjoyed this show as much as Todd and I have bringing it to you. It really matters to us to bring real conversations with real people that help challenge your beliefs and help you live well. So on behalf of myself, Todd Miller, and the entire team here at Your TV and, of course, Wow New Media, until next time, be well.